Good. Welcome. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Central Europe and in the morning North America. Welcome to the webinar Digital Signage at Scale. My name is Florian. I'm from Invidis and I'm your host today. For the next hour, we want to talk about monetizing digital signage. Very interesting topic, and I hope many of you. I'm sure many of you have thought about that. And you see all these great billboards. You go to Times Square or to London or so, and you see all this great stuff. But unfortunately, it's not that easy. And as you're all aware of, there's digital out of home, there's digital signage, same technology, but very different business models. And today we have a great guest here, and we wanted to discuss a little bit about the potential of monetizing digital signage, what it really takes. Obviously, it takes a good software. The guys of Logos are sponsoring that, so thank you to that. And it takes much more than just the software to manage that. So I just want to do a short introduction. To start off with, ladies first, obviously, Alice Go. Alice Go is Senior Vice President, Strategy, Innovation, and Product of Captivate Network. And you will learn a lot about real estate, golf carts, and everything. I'm really looking forward to that, Alice. Welcome to our show today. Secondly, Chris Waterman, Global Marketplace Development Manager of Vista Media. Programmatic, it's a really big topic. Chris, you are the expert in this one, and I'm sure you will add a lot of interesting topics and views on how to monetize things, because everything changed in digital out of home with programmatic, and a lot of things look fantastic on paper. Not everything works that perfectly, but we are still everyone working on that, so to make it better in the future. Then we have Maroon Isaac from Director of Business Development Retail Solutions of Intel. He's based in Arizona, and I probably don't have to introduce Intel. Everyone knows Intel in the sound. And last but not least, the host or the sponsor of the whole program, Martin Lynch from Logos. He's based at the head office of Logos in northern France. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being, for participating in our webinar today. And Alice, I want to start with you because you are the digital out of home network media owner, and so you're really focusing on real estate, on putting screens in golf course, even golf carts. So how big is your network, and what kind of screens do you have, and how is the whole thing working?
Yeah, it's firstly, thank you so much for having us. I think this is an interesting conversation to have, especially right now, because we're seeing a lot more people asking the question of, you've got a digital signage network. What's it about? How big is it? How much money can you make? Those are questions that are becoming more and more of interest as the world is digitizing and as people are seeing values in their screens beyond what had been done to date. As a part of Captivate, we're in a unique position. We somehow have already accumulated a network of over 30,000 screens across North America. We capture about over 100 North American markets, and in the US, we are able to span multiple verticals. So we're best known for the screens inside of commercial office spaces. We have the larger buildings. We've also done expansion into golf carts, as you mentioned, and this is now also expanded to residential. The growth of our screens and the growth of our network has followed the trajectory of the modern professional. So the audience is at the core of who we serve. And so as our audience is moving, not just within work, as work life is expanding into work-life integration, and there's a lot more kind of boundaries being crossed, business is happening in the office, business is happening at home, business is happening in the golf course. Business people are going to areas of recreation. So Captivate has expanded to be work, live, play, and those are all the areas that we live in. So I think I answered a little bit more than what you just asked, but hopefully that.
That's great. Alice, obviously I have to ask now, I mean, the past 2 years must have been tremendously difficult for you because people not going to the office. So because digital out of home or monetizing is all about audience, right?
Right. And so that's where I think the joy of digital, which I guess there's two sides to that coin, is that we can be so flexible, we can be so adaptive. So before the pandemic, we really did focus on the office space. That's where we were, and that was our bread and butter. We were inside of the elevators. Once the area where people work diversified, we diversified alongside it, and our form factor diversified as well, right? So we've best been known for our, quote, elevator product that sits inside of an elevator. There's a lot of installation that goes into that. There's a lot of operational work. We are becoming lighter and faster as we move forward. So we have a large format display product that can be mounted anywhere. We've changed the way that we deliver our product. So rather than having a whole just nuts and bolts, but like with server cabinets and, working with travel cables and we can now deliver through a small, almost Amazon Fire Stick type, plug and play device for those who already have signage that want to take advantage of it. We deliver via the cloud, and we've even diversified our form factor so that we have a pedestal-based Captivate Scan as a product. It's 21.5-inch screen that you don't even have to mount to a wall. It's on a pedestal. So we're trying to make it easier for people to continue accessing our network and follow our audience where they need us to be, not only because the audience is valuable, but what we want to deliver to them, what people have, what property managers, what building owners, what comms folks inside of businesses have wanted to be able to communicate to their clients. Digital signage is one of the best ways to do so, and for brands as well, that's one of the best ways to do so. And so we're making our form factors as diverse as what our audiences are.
Chris, I want to get you into the discussion because I know you're a specialist in programmatic, but just first talk about some key metrics. How do you differentiate certain networks? It's about dwell time, it's about frequency. Could you just, help, if I own 20 screens, in a supermarket, what do I have to look for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think analyst brings up some really important points, especially around flexibility and being adaptable. So we kind of look at screens and networks very, very differently, and each have a different value proposition. So we don't see them as all the same. So a screen in a supermarket versus a billboard versus an office building will have different value points, and really about how they're being measured is really important. And then we kind of take that value and we push it out to our marketplace, to our buyers, and say, wherever these audiences are, whether they be in a supermarket, whether they be in office buildings or wherever they are, there's value there, and then being able to kind of extract that and push that out to transact. So it really depends on what the network is and where that audience is and what that audience really segments towards, because you can't kind of put a value on the environment and everything the same. And I think that's where a lot of networks who are being flexible and being adaptive, like Captivate and others, are starting to extract more value as they diversify their audiences and start to spread more into digital signage networks.
But in general, I mean, we have to look, there's certain ways, either you specialize on a certain target audience, so like office workers, for example, so you know exactly, what kind of background they have, or you go on a roadside thing, where it's just masses. So I think it's a totally two different business cases, aren't they?
Yeah, they're totally different business cases, and that's where we really partner with the network provider and understand, who is the audience that you're really good at targeting, and then be able to tell that story to programmatic buyers, because ultimately the audience is still the same and how they kind of sell it, but the way that they're transacting is now becoming automated. So we really partner with those networks and say, if you're targeting these types of high income earners, office workers in these buildings, they have a different value point versus other locations or in other screens. So how can we kind of mold that and extract that value and push that through programmatic pipes? And that's where we really lean on our partners to kind of help us understand and try and price that and value that appropriately.
Alice, coming back to you, what are the challenges? I mean, I own a few screens, media player, probably I need software, obviously, from Telelogos, I assume, and some other one. So what are the challenges in operating management? Is it a contract? Is it difficult, to get contract, to find the right places? Is it, what are the challenges in your day-to-day business?
It's funny because you recognize that there are challenges. I think a lot of people, some maybe that we on this group have encountered, they think that a digital screen is like a tree. And if you put water on the money tree and you turn it on, then all of a sudden these fruits are going to start falling. That has never been the case in our experience. It's not that simple. There's a science behind it. Earlier in the series, you all talked about, I think, the importance of remote digital device management, real-time data sources. That's all a part of the challenges that we face day to day. We want to be very careful about where we put these screens, the device management, making sure that there is a full network operation center. And then for Captivate, one of the bigger challenges we bring to the table is how do we attract our audience? How do we delight? How do we engage we have over 175 different content partners. With those content partners, we also have a team of editors that's live curating what shows up on our network. We want to make sure that things can be read in a certain period of time. So the screen that you see is never as easy as you would think it is. There's a network operations center that runs 24/7. There is a content team, editorial team, studio team, creative services team, ad ops. There's a whole it does in fact take a village. And the challenge of digital out of home is that for the viewer, we want to make this such a easy, enjoyable experience. They think there's not that much science that goes behind it, when in fact, it truly is something that requires a lot of not only what we do and what we specialize in, but partnerships. So we do work with folks like this. We do work with folks like Intel and those who can bring data to the table and those who can bring information to the table, because we're constantly optimizing the value that we deliver both to advertisers and to viewers.
But first, before we come to data, it's obviously a very, very important topic, and the topic Intel is very good at. But it's really about, I think we first need to talk about, that there are different business types of operating digital out-of-home networks. So it can be just 100% advertisement. It can be a mix of news and weather. I mean, we all know that, and other information. And I think, Alice, your network is typical because your audience, comes, sees your screens a couple times every day. So I think it's important to give them added value, right? That's a decision you decided also to add, local news, to add weather or information around your local neighborhood, so to be relevant. Because otherwise, people, if they see the same screen a couple times a day, they just don't look at it anymore, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually made a very deliberate decision to do this, but our screens don't just flip from advertising to news. When you look at our screen, what you'll see is a combination of sometimes what a brand message is on alongside of our content message, alongside of weather, alongside of time. The reason we do that is in the visual experience for the viewer, they do truly, in fact, engage with our screens. And so we have become a welcome form of entertainment, a welcome added value. And that is why we do choose to use editors that are hand curating our content. That's why we're always seeking new content partnerships. That doesn't just bring value to the viewership, it also brings value to the brands. Our brands can, in fact, use some of our premium products to interact with different areas of the screen, to use dynamic ads, to use weather triggers, to use content triggers. These types of kind of specialty or custom, or in our case, we consider them quite premium, viewer experiences bring a lot more nuance to what the viewers see, because we have a viewer that comes back time and time again. They're not here just once. We don't want to create viewer fatigue. We want to continue to create excitement on our screens.
Talk about excitement, Maroon. Data, it's a huge topic, and you guys at Intel, I mean, everyone knows you're doing silicon, back and forth, but you guys are also doing, sensors and other things. So what are the challenges in collecting data in public spaces, and how can you monetize it or make sense out of it?
Thank you for allowing me to be here, Florian, with this esteemed panel. Data is really critical moving forward. I would say it's very foundational for our industry. We're talking about a screen in the future that it's even today that is audience aware, contextual aware, AI, anything aware. Alice talked about the screen needs to be remotely managed aware, security aware, etc. And so, but at the same time, we're in the industry all about becoming an effective medium, and by virtue of the need to use data, we at the same time need to make sure that we're anchored in privacy. And so while I see the privacy equation as a challenge, we have all the technology and the ingredient capabilities and the processes in the industry to ensure that we're privacy compliant. We use different types of data sets to ensure that the screen is audience and contextual aware. Today, our friends Chris from Vistar on the call, and other SSP providers in our space, people like Hivestack, Adomni, Broadsign, etc. Today, they use device ID data, or the ad ID data, or the IDFA, and they use it for audience planning, activation, attribution. And all of this data today, while it's being done in the cloud, it's truly anchored in privacy. And because the data providers that power, the Vistars of the world, the Hivestacks of the world, people like Ground Truth, PlaceIQ, Cito, and all of them, their data is actually GDPR compliant. And so, it's not a challenge, but never the mind, it's at the top of our mind, and we need to ensure that we remain privacy compliant moving forward. So that's the cloud data. On the edge, we're talking about our ability. The screen has the ability, has enough processing to sense the environment around it. We're capable of onboarding CV data. Earlier you mentioned dwell time, opportunity to see how many people are around the screen, being able to understand demographic, age, gender, who's looking at the ad, etc. And we're able actually to make sense of that data in real time and do it anonymously. And again, while you might think this is a challenge from a privacy perspective, but to the extent that you can deconstruct an image in less than 10 milliseconds, this is like 1/100th of a second, delete that image, make sense of all of the attributes, and only send the data to the metadata to the cloud, we're capable of meeting the challenge and still remain anonymous and privacy compliant, and enable the screen to inform what relevant ad to play on the screen moving forward. Now, I see a huge opportunity for the industry to move moving forward, to move into the physical store. This is, some people are calling this, the sale of the century, where it's $100 billion opportunity for us. And that introduces a third set of data, and it's first-party data. And so to the extent moving forward that we're capable of onboarding the CV data, the imaging data, and privacy compliant with first-party data, and whether it's the loyalty data, the transaction data, the weather data that Alice mentioned earlier, to the extent that we can do that and get now the global DSPs to transact on that, there's a huge opportunity to create incremental value for the industry. So instead of people like Chris and Vistar and other SSPs being able to serve ads programmatically to the screen at the traditional CPM average, by inserting these very rich attributes, I believe we can easily create an incremental value on a per CPM basis, anywhere from 20 to 40%. So data is really important, Florian. We need to be anchored in privacy. At the same time, we have all the ingredient capabilities to ensure that the network, the retail network, the Captivates of the world, are intelligent from an end-to-end perspective, intelligent in the cloud, intelligent at the edge, and creating incremental value for the brand and ensuring the consumer is happy because you're serving them relevant content.
Really interesting, but I think we should really explain the audience that there are three ways of managing data. One is really on device, and the second one's on the edge, and the third one's on the cloud. And obviously, the less data you send to the cloud, the easier it is to be GDPR compliant. That's a very simple one. Then there are various different cases, why you need, edge computing, and so. But it's really important to understand, where, at which place, at which space, you're really, looking at your data. So, Martin, you're from Telelogos. You're offering a CMS system, much more than a CMS system, a full platform. So, what are your, where do you see your benefits, and where do you see, how you're positioned, and what is, how do you choose the right CMS, and what are specialties in digital out-of-home you have to look at?
Well, for us at Telelogos, being purely a software editor, digital out-of-home or even classical digital signage, we rely on others. We rely on Intel, we rely on the Vistars, we rely on a lot of other elements to provide a solution at the end. I'm glad you said we're a bit more than a CMS, Florian, and I've said this many times before. For those who don't know us, the actual origin of the company, where we come from almost 40 years ago, in data synchronization. So data is our thing, and I totally agree with what Maroon was saying about data being the next step and moving forward. The 20 and 40% increase that's possible, I totally am alongside that as well. We're already doing that type of content broadcast on classical digital signage, where we're triggering content based on data, whether it's coming from the local machine itself, its local network on the edge, or even cloud data that is, conditioning the broadcast of an advertisement or a piece of content on a screen. So we are right there at the root of all of this, and the data that's being generated, we're able to manipulate it as well. The security and privacy that we've been speaking about as well is something very high in our agenda as well. So we need to also respect and comply to all those requirements. For moving forward in the digital out-of-home industry, the programmatic, DLogos has created in the recent version a campaign module just specifically for digital out-of-home, which allows to easily hook up to the Vistars and the other SSSPs that provide programmatic data. So a simple container that you place in your playlist, mixing it up with your own content, why not, or other providers of content, and having all of that in the same playlist and getting that advertisement content in an automatic way. And what Alice was talking about earlier, the way Captivate create content with the advertisement, with the time and the weather, etc., all of that on the screen. Yes, I'm along with that as well. It's something we see from classic digital signage. I think the digital out-of-home industry could benefit from broadcasting in that shape. I would call it, having not just the ad on a display, but other interesting information. Don't forget about the people who are actually in front of these screens 8 hours a day because it's in front of their building or their office or whatever. It can become maybe an eyesore for those people.
But there's also, you always need to be aware, what you're showing, what you're mixing, especially when you mix information and a broadcast feed maybe or so. That could be, very difficult for license reasons or so. You cannot just show, football game and putting your own advertising on the bottom or so. You would go to jail directly. That's very, they don't like it. And Chris, now it's your turn, because most people will say, well, I've heard about programmatic, but I have no clue what it really means. And I'm in the industry for 15 years, and I talk to a lot of people, we do conferences around the world. And whenever, people come up to me and say, Florian, do you have time? Could you explain me what programmatic is all about? So Chris, it's your time now. Explain, why we didn't need to 5 years ago, and now the whole hope of the industry is on your shoulders, and everyone believes, you will change everything. So maybe within a few minutes, maybe you can just explain, what the key services of programmatic are and why, with your services, the industry is getting much larger and you get access to new budgets.
Okay, well, we only have a few minutes, so I'll try my best to sum up. But no, I think so. Thinking about it in a really simple way, so programmatic is just data and automation. It's really taking all of the manual tasks and systems that went into buying and selling media before and putting technology and automating that, and then adding data on top of it to make it more intelligent. So, an agency or a buyer or an advertiser wants to be able to transact to an audience using data and using technology in a much more sophisticated and intelligent way. It's more efficient for both a buyer and a seller to trade around programmatic. And so that's really that's why there's so much growth happening in all other channels. And really out of home is the last kind of frontier of programmatic, because of all the challenges that Martin and Maroon have just kind of touched on, is that's really been the last frontier, is why out of home is the last one. But that's what makes it so exciting, because advertisers are now coming in and understanding what the value is for these screens, that there is rich data here, that there is audiences here that they can transact and reach through technology. So I think, in summary, I think it's just about automating those manual tasks and adding data on top to try and hit an advertiser's correct audience in the most efficient way. And that's really exciting, because as more digital buyers come into this space and start to transact, that ultimately grows this out-of-home pie more and more and more. And important to note that this will definitely not replace everything that's happening. If you point to online and the programmatic share, that's still about kind of 50-55%. So whilst programmatic does make up a large portion of it, it's not one of these things that will take everyone, take over everything. There's still a human element, and there's still a human element to kind of extract that value. All we're kind of doing is putting technology to clean up and make it more efficient. So yeah.
Yeah, but I think the game changer.
Florian, can I add some context if you don't
mind?
Yeah,
sure.
I honestly see programmatic as so critical moving forward for the digital out-of-home industry. It's a small portion of the industry today. Chris, you might have the data. We're probably anywhere between 14 to 20% of the overall ad budget spent at programmatic today. I would say over the next 3 years, it needs to become at 50% or more. It's so critical to be able to serve the right audience when they are in proximity of a digital out-of-home screen and serve it programmatically, or when the consumer is actually inside of the store, inside of the aisle, in front of a digital shelf, digital end cap. That is the future of our industry, to the extent that you can help a brand at the moment of truth, and that moment of the truth is when the consumer is actually in proximity of the screen. To the extent that you can leverage data and serve the ad programmatically, that is the future. Now, I want you to imagine this. Imagine we can mimic what the world of mobile and online can do to serve ads programmatically. We as a digital out-of-home industry, I believe we can do that because we have all the tools to not only onboard CV data, but use those rich attributes, include them in the bid stream, and start generating ad requests. And when Chris talks about, we're going to actually enable the global DSPs, whether it's the Yahoo DSP, the Google DSP, the Trade Desk, Xaxis of the world, to start transacting on this very rich bid stream specific to the digital out-of-home industry. I believe you're going to start to see us eat into the digital ad budget and tremendously increase the overall ad spend on the digital out-of-home industry. And programmatic is going to play such a strategic and critical role in enabling all of that.
I think we all agree that's the future. But to be honest, currently, and I'm sure, Alice, it's also the case with you, direct booking is still your bread and butter business. And obviously, the growth comes more or less from programmatic. And what we haven't mentioned yet is the cool thing about programmatic is that it opened up also new budgets. Because in the past, there was always out-of-home budgets, and with programmatic now we are able to get online budgets, video budgets, mobile budgets, and everything. And this, for me, is already a game changer. Not even talking about real time. In the past, it took 6 weeks, to book something. Now you can do it within a minute. So this is really changing.
Can I share a secret with you, Florian? Everything that I described and what Chris described, this is not a vision for 2025. We have all of the ingredient capabilities to make that happen today. It's just whether we have the will as an industry to become a truly, fully digital medium. This is the opportunity that we have. We really need to take advantage. By the way, all the other mediums, they continue to invest in data and analytics. And unless we match what they're doing, we have all the ingredient capabilities. Unless we match what they're doing, we're gonna be added to the list of the dearly departed. Very simple.
But Alice, you're operating a media network. Let us know what role has programmatic today, and what has it 2 years ago, and what do you expect to have it in 2 years from now, maybe?
It continues to be transformative. And I think, Maroon, I am just as bullish as you are about how programmatic is going to change the consideration of digital at home. But Florian, I'm going to back up to a question that you asked earlier with regard to some of the challenges in a digital at home network. I think right now the tools exist. If you have a digital signage network, the tools exist, the data exists. We have partners and telelogos who bring the software to the table. We have the data, we have the part. While that does exist, for many, and just going back to the topic of this conversation, being monetizing new or existing digital signage networks, that existing point does bring to the table, while we're kind of moving, like throttling forward into this new frontier of programmatic, all of those qualities that change the transactional nature of the buyers, right? Because that's what programmatic brings to the table, that's what data brings to the table. It requires a lot of what the players, what the software, what the hardware, whether you're on-prem or in cloud. We, to a certain extent, are dealing with also some tech debt remediation that just needs to happen inside of the digital out-of-home marketplace, right? The devices have moved faster, the technology has moved faster than some of the actual network operators have been prepared to keep up with. And so because we're battling this identity, and I'm not speaking to Captivate, because our technology is real good right now. For many of those that are in our ecosystem, right, we're battling the legacy and then the new. And how do we keep up with what our buyers expect, what the new world of transactions expect? You know, as from a hardware perspective, from an operational perspective, and that's where the partnerships matter. That's where being able to work with others in the space matter, I believe.
But Alice, could you raise more money now with programmatic? Is it able? Could you get higher CPMs?
Our share is growing. Yeah, absolutely. No, the share of programmatic and digital and direct buying, that continues to grow from a share perspective. But what Chris said, I mean, it's still a human business. It's still a relational business. It's still going to require conversations, and it depends on the buyer, because we aren't just transactional, we're relational in our business in the way that we sell and the type of solutions we bring to our brands.
Chris, does everything really go automatically? Or, I mean, Alice mentioned, you mentioned before, there's still some humans in it. And I also know often there's some Excel spreadsheets in between, because, you know, on paper it looks so fantastic, you know, an end-to-end solution, but in reality, there are always some challenges. Is that right?
Yeah, there's challenges in every market and in programmatic today, and there's challenges in a mature online programmatic market, and they will always exist. I think, you know, it's really about kind of taking, you know, being able to access how buyers and how digital buyers want to transact in the future. You know, digital buyers and advertisers are saying, we have to keep investing in digital, and these are the ways that we have to transact. And in order to capture that revenue or that budget, you know, digital out-of-home networks need to be equipped. So it's really then making sure that the technology layer is you know, there, and then adding that human layer that knows the networks and is able to sell and advocate to capture those budgets from digital buyers that have probably never transacted on out-of-home before. So it's about positioning. The challenges will always be there, but I think, you know, if you say to someone who's a media buyer or who's kind of running a network, if we can kind of reduce their time in Excel by 50%, I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. So I think, you know, moving people out of spreadsheets and trying to get, you know, more automated, that's a win-win, but there'll always be challenges with, you know, network capabilities and the speed of which everything is happening. And I think that that's an important point, is that as a network operator coming in, you have to be prepared to kind of invest a little bit up front to kind of bring your network or your operations up to the standard of where, you know, everything wants to be going. So I think that's a really important point, because people just come in and just expect, you know, money to kind of just start falling down onto them, and it's, you know, it's exactly the opposite.
I'm a little bit disappointed. I was hoping you could explain us, you know, how it works. No, but what does it take? What is the minimum? What are the minimum requirements? I mean, I need a screen, I need a media player, software. Do I need a minimum audience or a reach, or what does it take? I mean, if I own screens, you know, when can I call you or Alice or whoever, you know, and say, you know, how can I monetize my network? To all
I think, you know, yeah, I can kind of go. I think, you know, at a minimum, our sweet spot is a minimum of around 50 to 100 screens. You know, anything below that, it's really not going to be worth the energy and the time on both sides. So, if, you know, Florian, if you came to me and said, I have 2 screens in a supermarket, if I make you $5, you're going to come back and say, Chris, why did you only make me $5? So there's, you know, that kind of 50 to 100 starts to get interesting. And anything over that, you know, you have to have a salesperson, you have to have, you know, really strong network operations teams that are managing it. But from an audience perspective, you know, it has to be, and I think Alice kind of touched on this, you know, you can't just like put a screen somewhere and hope that, you know, money is just going to, you know, come into it. You have to be able to put screens and your networks in an environment where there is a valuable audience, or whether there is a differentiated audience. I think those 2 things are really like foundational for success, and that's when you can kind of go out and kind of capitalize on that.
And by the way, that's the value of programmatic. I mean, Chris, Vistar Media can be network agnostic, so they can actually aggregate a number of network, and again, to the extent that we can do a great job informing who is the audience planning, then you can actually start to engage in the national brands and drive these national, whether they're local advertisement or at the national level. That's the value of programmatic.
Martin, I think it also takes not only CMS, but it also takes APIs, right? You need to connect to certain infrastructures. So what does it take? I mean, we have talked about supply side platforms, demand side platforms, CMS. All of these. Most people don't know. So maybe you can help us a little bit, to explain what's really necessary.
Yeah, I think there's something that very important that probably we should mention, and that is that what we've been saying from the beginning can be scary for some people. It's a whole new world. A lot of complicated terms, and people may not understand exactly how it works. You don't have to jump in heads first into this. This is something digital out of home. You can start and just get your toes wet. You can use a part of your sequence or your playlist reserved for that. Test it out, try it out. Like Chris said, a network of 50 or 100 screens. There are a lot of people out there that have those networks. And it hasn't come into their head how to monetize it, because for them, they think it's a whole big scary world that they don't belong in. And I'd like today, to break that. I think that's not the case anymore. With the correct software and the correct hardware, if it's already out there and in place and it's online, you can hook up to Vistar. You can, reserve a part of your slot for that. If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't work straight away, it's not the end of the world. Your system is still up and running. It's still doing what you've originally put it into place to do. That's changing an existing network or exploiting an existing network. For creating a new network, it's a simple thing as well. It doesn't have to be as complicated as we may have made it sound in the beginning of the webinar with our initial questions, using all of these terms that people may not be familiar with when they're not from this part of the industry. So yeah, definitely I wanted to get that across. I think it's probably the most important. For us, in our digital signage solution, you talk about APIs and hooking up. No, you don't need that initially to start. It's basically just a container is what we call it, that you place in your playlist, and it's Chris's job to fill that container with an advertisement. In a nutshell, that's how it works. So your machine or your screen is identified with a unique ID. That unique ID will be it will have a location. It will have a profile of people that walk past that display or visit that location, or industries that are around it, or commerce that is around it. And that's all done by these guys. That's their job. A network owner doesn't need to do all of that work. It just needs to have the devices, the displays, and hook up into a system such as Vistar, and it's very easily done. So I'd be more than happy to talk about that to anybody after this webinar on a one-to-one basis. Hooking up with APIs, yeah, we can go further. Let's step it up a bit, and we can say, okay, I can take content coming in, and I can say that content should only play if it's warm, or if I have another type of a product or a service. There's a lot of conditioning that we can do based on the data that we're pulling in from other solutions, like Maroon mentioned earlier. Edge computing can be, stocking, storing, generating, transferring data that we can exploit. So there are different ways of looking at it, is what I'd like to get across.
So there's no big hurdle to try it out, because it's a container, and I don't have to program my playlist every day. It's just something done automatically. Either Vistar is selling, or it's similar, the company is selling something or not, and then you wouldn't even see it that there's a missing link.
Yeah, it's exactly that. We wanted to explain it really basically. That's it in a nutshell. There's containers that are filled with advertisements if your display corresponds to the profile that brand is looking to display its content on. And in addition, I'd like to also say that if there isn't an advertisement, and Chris will be the first to tell you, you won't always have ads in your containers. That's not an issue either, because the software is intelligent enough to see that, okay, I have a container, doesn't contain anything, so I will put in a filler, or I will skip it. It does all of this in an automatic manner as well. So again, not requiring specific development, etc. Telelogos has always and will always produce software that is standardized. We constantly bring out new versions, features, and functions, but we bring out these features and functions for everybody. You know, we don't do unique specific versions for one integrator or one network or one customer. We standardize this. So when we stepped into the DOOH world over the past year or two with our new campaign module, that was the idea as well. We didn't invent something. We went to the people who worked there and we said, what do you think is required in a campaign module for a digital signage solution such as ours? There are hundreds of features and functions, and in reality, how many are used? Maybe one or two. And it's going back to what you said, Florian, about programmatic being there, but the Excel sheet is just as important. So in the campaign module, in the way of working, it's similar. You don't need all of those 100 different features and functions that are possible. One or two is enough to get you up and running.
And you're already longer in the industry, so 4 or 5 years ago, I assume it was much more difficult to convince advertisers to place their advertisement on your network than it's today, or it's an established media, people know it, people see it, and it's fully accepted, or?
Yeah, no, we're very fortunate to have had not just our own team, but so many teams in this industry continually speaking with advertisers, advocating for the capabilities, the flexibility, the data, the adaptability of the digital out-of-home kind of marketplace. Advocacy and education will continue to be a part of the conversation, right? Even we've touched it. That's the human element. That's going to continue to happen. But it is becoming a lot more in consideration. I think Captivate has done a pretty good job of actually, even in transactions, breaking out of just digital out-of-home budgets and moving into the future that Maroon is describing for us, where we have diversified into being, part of digital consideration and others. And that is because not only the advocacy campaign that we've embarked on over the past 24 years of our history, but because that's where the industry is naturally going with the capabilities that are afforded us.
And Maroon, you talked a lot about, capturing data, at the point of sale or right next to the screen. But I mean, this is obviously your core offering. But I think it's also part of the story that you don't always need live data. Also some historical data or third-party data, something which can really enrich your database and help you to better sell it, obviously. And you at Intel, you're good at collecting live stuff as well as analyzing and getting insights out of historical data. Or?
Yeah, again, we work with the industry to make all of this happen, Florian. Again, our retail media network today and in the future, they need to be intelligent from an end-to-end perspective, intelligent in the cloud, intelligent in the edge. There's a role for the cloud. There's absolutely a role for the edge. Again, today, Vistar, they use the cloud quite a bit to make sense of audience planning, to do programmatic activation, because they're using the device ID data. All of the analytics is done in the cloud. That will continue to be in the cloud. The challenge with that is, as Google and Apple do away with the IDFA or the ad ID, we may need to start to prepare for a world without a cookie or without the ad ID. Hence, the other data, so we need to start looking at other data sets, whether it's the real-time, the real-time sensing data, the computer vision data, right, and or the first-party data. And by the way, the world of retail, whether it's the tier 1, tier 2, anyone with access to first-party data, they're starting to become media exchanges. Walmart is a media exchange. CVS, Walgreens, anyone with access to first-party data, they want to monetize that data. And our industry, the digital out-of-home industry, has a huge opportunity today, not tomorrow, today, to be able to leverage that data, fuse it with the CV data. Alice earlier, she mentioned the term ad mediation. It doesn't exist fully, but this is where we as an industry can invest in an ad mediation engine. Martin has a contact, he has, CMS and a context engine. There's an opportunity here, and Intel can play a huge role in building the software for the industry. We'll license it to the industry at zero cost. You guys can go monetize it. But to the extent you can build an ad mediation engine that can start to generate these ad requests. Today, the bid stream that our industry uses, for the most part, is empty. Google bid stream, when you go online, has hundreds and hundreds of attributes. If we can generate a bid stream with very rich data, whether it's the computer vision data and or the combination of first-party data, I believe what used to be Verizon Media or the Yahoo DSP and Xaxis can start to transact on this data and create immense value for our industry.
But I think at the end of the day, all the data, you know, at the end of it only triggers the right advertisement or the right campaign. Because at the end of the day, you know, we want to, you know, play out campaigns. We want to reach out to the audience out there. I think it's really relevant. And
yes, and Florian, we're not going back to the old loop-based model that is traditional digital out-of-home. We're not going back to the one-to-many medium. That's very inefficient, very ineffective. Digital out-of-home is one to a select audience. This is why Vistar Media exists. That's our future. If we want to remain a relevant, a very effective ad medium, we must leverage data to ensure that we're serving the right ad at the right time and to the right target audience.
That's also one of the reasons why retail media is becoming such a hype recently. I mean, in the pandemic, only supermarkets were open, so everyone went to a grocery store. And one of the few places where you really could reach out to the audience was in the grocery store, right? Because the train stations were empty, at least over here in Europe. I think same in New York City. Nobody was on the street, so you could only go there. So that was one of the reasons. And combining this with live data, with sensors and everything, you could obviously, you know, be more targeted than you could ever before.
Yeah. And late 2019, 2020 proved that. You needed to serve where the right audience is. So again, to the extent that our industry was capable of using data. I mean, when we came out of COVID, our industry was monitoring where the density of audiences are to ensure that we're serving not only the right content, but to the right target audience. Because again, people were in home, not outside of the home. And so as we started to unlock you know, in major city infrastructure around the world, our industry actually used device ID data to understand in real time where the real audiences are, so we can start serving advertisement. And by the way, this is part of the reason why Xaxis is so excited and saying that our industry is going to grow 20% plus this year. I think what Mark Reed of WPP or the Group M just announced some a few months back. You know, our industry is doing an amazing job, and I believe we have a huge opportunity to become a lot bigger than what we are today because of the investment in data and ensuring that you have the right screen infrastructure. We talked quite a bit about edge compute. So there's a really key learning from this conversation today to Alice, the Captivate team, and other media owners. Please make sure you invest in the right infrastructure. Your screen is going to sit in the same XYZ coordinates for the next 5 to 10 years. So don't be short-term centric. Don't be cheap. I don't mean it in a bad way. Think longer term, because your screen has the potential to do a lot more than what it's doing today.
I'd agree with not even just the potential, but the expectation will evolve of our screens, the data that they are required, the connectivity that is required, the bandwidth, the size, all of that makes such a difference. And that's kind of, I think, what's going to help drive and deliver against the expectations of the future, to your point.
And I think, I mean, it sounds maybe for some who are new to the industry a little bit too complicated, because we really go into depth now into large, very, you know, connected networks. But I think the main message, you know, of this webinar should also be, you know, just give it a try. I mean, Martin, you said 50 to 100 screens. It's fine to start off with, and you don't have to be all the sensor around it or so. Just the flexibility which digital out-of-home really delivers is fantastic. And you guys are still in a lucky state. You know, we're back in lockdown now here in Europe, and I hope it doesn't happen to you. So, and it's pretty bad, but, you know, digital out-of-home industry can react really, really fast, you know, to all these changes. And I mean, obviously, if you have sensors, you can react within seconds. But still, digital out of home is such a huge, huge advantage towards, other media, where you do long-term planning and things change very fast. And today they introduced 2G plus, so everyone has to be tested to go in the store. So you need to adapt to that really fast, to your messages, to how what you want to convene. Or so I think digital out of home, digital signage in general, in combination with advertising, something which is a really, really fascinating platform with great potential, as Maroon and Alice and Chris really you showed. But also the existing platform most screens are operated on currently, offers already a lot of potential without getting the really big thing. So we have only 10 minutes left. So Martin, could you help me? Are there any questions from the audience? I cannot see anything, but
I have on another screen. There are a couple that popped up. Some may have been answered already in our chat. So the first one, in a very concrete point of view, if I want to monetize today my network, how should I proceed? Quite simply, if you have the network and it corresponds to, like Chris was saying, 50, 100 displays, reaching out to either Chris or a CMS provider, Telelogos, it's easy to put into place. It doesn't need development. You don't need anything technical to be added in. It's just placing something there, and the work is done on Vistar side. So that's what I would answer to that one. Anybody else wants to throw in something while I read another question, maybe?
I mean, Martin, the integration work is so easy with the SSPs, with Vistar, with Hivestack, others. It's an API call. Let Vistar work on your behalf. It's so simple to monetize.
Exactly. And I think that's probably not clear to everybody. So that's why this webinar is a great chance to get that across. It's something we probably don't mention enough. Just reading the questions, who should I engage with? Just answer that, saying reach out to either Chris at Vistar, Alice, myself, Maroon. Any of us can help you out with that. How large should a network be to interest Vistar Media? We just answered that. So 50 to 100 to begin with.
That's the audience. Without 50 screens, without audience is useless.
Yeah.
The frequency for the screen.
Yeah, so I think that's all. If anybody else has questions, I see there's plenty of people still here, so don't hesitate. We can we can wait a few more minutes and type away.
Yeah, to kind of flip over actually, Martin, to that first question that you received. It's a very interesting group of folks that we have gathered on this call. I mean, your team offers the software as a service. So for those who are trying to dip their toes into the water, figure out what this is all about, there's a software as a service solution available here. From the Intel side, we have data as a service solution. From Chris's side, we have revenue as a service. And Captivate does offer also content as a service, right? So you bring all of these elements together and it becomes easier because you don't need to know the words. You don't need to figure out what the content strategy and the data strategy and the revenue strategy is or the software strategy. There are folks that are part of the ecosystem already that will help leverage something that exists or something that you are thinking about building. It's not going to have to be figure it out on your own. Fortunately, the industry is mature enough now.
Definitely.
And you don't need a media sales team anymore because Chris is taking over.
Any questions? Any new? Okay, does digital out of home work in Europe or is it today only for the US? That's a question for Chris. Does the digital out of home work in Europe today or is it only US?
Digital out of home knows no boundaries. So we are global. We are in Europe, the US, Canada, APAC, and Latin America. So wherever there is a screen, I can safely assure you that we can put an ad on that screen.
But there are different regulations, obviously, in regards to roadside. In some places it's easier, in other places more difficult. Obviously, also cultural backgrounds. Some people are more open to it, others it's a little bit more difficult. So in Europe, for example, in historical old cities, it's very difficult to put up huge screens. Even a shopping window or so, you would get in deep trouble putting up some screens there. So there are some differences, but the business model in general works across the world. And also the part of digitization of the whole out-of-home market also differs a lot. In London, for example, it seems like 80% of it is digital. In New York City, it's maybe 50%. In other places in the countryside, it's only 10% or nothing. So it really changes. But obviously, the trend in general is going toward more digitization. But to be honest, there will always be a huge market just for static, because the location that doesn't give away more than that. But it's really, in general, it works very, very well across the world. Absolutely.
One more question. What revenue may I expect per display? I think, again, that's a question for Chris. Difficult to answer, Chris. Throw a number.
It depends. It depends on the environment, depends on the screen, it depends on the audience. But what we really do is we work with those partners to figure out what their targets are, and then jointly kind of come together and put strategies in place to say, if you want to make X amount of dollars from programmatic, and if that is a success metric for you, then we collectively come together and say, okay, what are the strategies that we can do together to make that a reality on a per device, on a per screen, or a network basis. So I'd say it depends, but we really kind of come together to make sure that we are working towards a common shared goal.
Mm-hmm.
Martin, we can easily turn this into a mathematical equation for whoever asked that question. It's all about CPM and how many thousands of impressions that you're generating, in your network traditionally. And Alex can answer that question. I believe the traditional digital out-of-home CPM value, the sponsored direct dollars, is roughly about $9 for digital out-of-home, $9 to $10 on a per CPM. From a programmatic perspective, Chris, you might be able to answer that. It's roughly about $5, right? And so if you have a network and you can quantify your impression that you're generating on a monthly basis, you can easily do the quick math in terms of how much you can do programmatic, how much you can do from a traditional digital out-of-home perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think on average that's kind of in the ballpark, but where we see some networks that have maybe airport inventory or really high value office buildings that have specific audiences, then that is like, much higher kind of double-digit CPMs and north of really high value, versus maybe, a kind of, roadside billboard that's kind of broad-based targeting and trying to hit as many people. So that spectrum is quite wide. But there's different strategies where we can work with a partner to kind of identify and kind of pull that CPM much higher to where it's comparable to kind of direct CPMs as well.
Some more questions just popped up. What type of brands in general are advertising on DOOH networks? Is there maybe probably thinking about maybe types of products or types of services? Is there something that stands out above the rest? I'm sure there is.
Yeah, so like our top three are CPG, entertainment, and finance. Those are probably the largest three, because kind of going back to like an underlying trend here is that those brands and those advertisers are all in on digital and data. So they want to be able to execute across digital channels as efficiently as possible. National advertisers, local advertisers are still kind of coming into it, but we really see local as kind of still being serviced by the direct sales team. So I'd say those three categories, all from global holding companies. So, or every single global holding company around the world is transacting and has kind of hands-on keyboard. So there's not an agency that wouldn't know or has experimented with this channel.
Okay. Two more have just popped up. One is actually quite interesting, and I think this is somebody maybe not familiar at all with the digital out-of-home, but it's a question I've often asked when I began at this myself, was how can I make sure that an advertisement from my competitor is not going to appear on my screen? For us, we know it's an easy answer, but for someone that doesn't know at all how it works, it's I think interesting. So Chris, I think that's for you.
Yeah. And I should have touched on this before, but one kind of key element within programmatic is that it's about control. So you can control the advertiser, the brand or the category that goes up on the screen, you can also control the price. So you're able to set, a price that you need to get, as well as the advertiser or brand. So that's baked in within the technology. So there's no risk of a competitor brand coming onto your screen for a much lower price than you set.
I think, yeah, and I think not just the competitor question, what you just said there is interesting. The fact that you do have a control. It's not just my screens are there and I have no control of what's going to arrive. It's the total opposite. You actually can set up filters and reasons and rules, and you do control. Another
Martin,
question.
One last question, yeah? Because we're 5 o'clock, running out of time. So if you want a question, or
last one, just on the terms of a contract, is there a minimum duration or exclusivities in contracts when you sign up with someone for DOOH?
Typically, no. And the business model is typically a revenue share, so it incentivizes both parties to make as much money as possible. So if you're not making any money, then obviously we're not making any money, and everyone is here to try and make money. So we want to try and help you grow as much as possible.
Okay.
Well, Alice, Chris, Maroon, and Martin, thanks a lot. I mean, I think we started with monetizing, and at the end of the day, we talked about how to monetize it. So, so thanks for your really interesting insights. And I think our key message is really give it a try. It's not that you have to hire a media team or so. With programmatic now, it become really easy to to monetize part of your network. Obviously, you need the audience, you need professional screens, you need good software, you need good media player and analytics and everything. And if you have this available, then it's absolutely worth a try in a really fascinating market, which is really exploding, which is really growing. So thanks to all of you, and well, have happy holidays. I think we can start that now. And we have a winter storm out there, so I will get dressed and go out and that. So thanks a lot to all of you, and especially to everyone out there. And if you have any questions, I mean, Telelogos and the whole team is happy to answer them. And stay safe, and hope to see you at IAC, at Infocom, whenever next year. And yeah, safe travel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.